Yes, you can go ahead.
Chairperson, I move to second the adoption of minutes.
Are you unmuted now?
Honourable Chair, I think he's got, oh, I see he put it on the chat group, sorry.
Yes, he put it on the chat. He wanted to be unmuted. So just wanted to check.
Yes, Chair, we have not muted him from our side, and from my side, all I can do is ask him to unmute. But
Okay.
he has not been muted from our side.
Oh, okay.
No, he's struggling, Chair, through you.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the problem lies.
Maybe if someone can maybe phone him and find out, because it looks like the problem is not with the host. Okay. So we've adopted the minutes of the, was it the 22nd of February?
Okay.
Honorable Donovu, if you can please mute. Whenever I try to unmute, it says the host will not on me. Maybe Honorable Tim, if you can maybe log out and log in again, if you can hear us. Just log out and log in again.
Honourable Chair, just afford me a few minutes to give him a call, please.
Okay.
Hello, Chair.
Yes. We can hear you now.
So sorry. I've been having problems for the last half an hour with connection, and then I had a problem with this unmuting story. To log off and log back in again. I just wanted to apologize, Chair, for my lack of participation so far. I'm sorry.
No,
But I'm sure my colleague, Honourable Boshoff, has been handling it for us. Safe to say, I vote against everything that has gone so far.
Okay. No, that's fine. That will be recorded as such.
My apologies, Chair. I'm here now.
Chairperson,
right,
just a correction. He votes against everything past and everything future.
Now, I'm sure you're referring to the bills, the two bills reports, not necessarily the minutes. Okay, can we then flight the next set of minutes? Is it the fourth one, eh?
Yes, Chair, the next set of minutes is the 8th of March.
8th of March. Still Department of Employment and Labor.
No, Eureka, this is last week's minutes. There's one more set before we get there, the 8th of March.
Okay, 8th of March, Mr. Bazia.
Nadia, I don't have that one.
Okay, Chair, can we then just go to the 15th of March so long? I'm just going to find out. Yes, come back to that one.
Okay, can you do that, Mr. Bazia? And yes, if you can scroll down, please.
Chair, sorry, I think. Okay.
Okay, let's conclude the ones of the 15th, and then we'll go back to the 8th, and you can update us.
Must be executed.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments, any corrections, any omissions? Honorable Apleni?
Thank you very much, Chair. I see that I'm not reflecting. You know, I was doubting in the previous minutes because I don't have my notebook with me.
Mm. Yeah, I did see you at the start of the meeting.
I know very well that I attended this one.
Okay, it will be corrected as such and reflect
Yes.
your presence in the meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. Honorable Moima, followed by Honorable Mamara Khan.
Let's allow Mamara Khan. I suspect the honorable member is making a correction because I want to move for the adoption, Chair.
Oh, okay. Honorable Mamara Khan, are you making any correction?
I don't want to make any corrections. I just want to find out as to whether this means up of the 15th, because I did send an apology. I don't know. Because I was
Yes,
trying to check
it was
my
a
mail as
last
to
week
whether
meeting.
I was in the meeting or what.
It was in the last meeting that you logged in, but then you had some problems of network, like you are experiencing now, actually. So
Yes, Chairperson. Find out as to whether my apology, did you receive my apology? Because I don't
yes,
see
Honorable
any
Moimang made us aware.
apology
Made us aware of your apology last week.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Honorable Moima.
Thank you, Chair, with the correction as proposed or as made. I formally move for the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you so much.
With the amendment made. Thank you.
All right. Can we have a seconder for the confirmation of the minutes of the 15th of March?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
I second. I was there in this meeting.
I second
so much.
too, I was there in the meeting.
Okay. Is there any contrary view? Not. Thank you so much. Can we get an update on the minutes of the 8th of March, Ms. Solomons? Or you managed together? Looks like someone is struggling to share.
Sorry, Chair, I thought I was sharing the screen. Apologies. Let me just try again.
Honorable Dango and Honorable Mimak, I see your hands are up.
Chair, it is the legacy hand. Thank you.
Okay. Honorable Dango.
Same here, Chairperson.
Okay, if you can lower the hand, please. Thank you so much. Any corrections, any comments? If you can just leave them like on, so that if there are any corrections, we can go to those, that particular section, if there are any corrections. Correction. Yes, Honorable
It's not a correction as such, Honorable Chairperson. I just want to check page 1. Enrico was very fast. I didn't see my name or I'm absent or what, because I'm compared this thing with my diary.
Oh, okay.
On the 8th, where was he on the 8th?
Can you go down? Okay, just go down, move down. Just hold on, just hold under apologies. Ah, you're too fast.
Hi.
Go under apologies, down.
There's only one apology, Honorable Chair, and that's Honorable Matavula.
Oh, okay.
Honorable Bishop. Chairperson, let me check my diary on the 8th of March, but we can go on. Let me check my diary.
All right.
Should have gone through the minutes already, Honorable Mashodi.
Okay, if you were there, then it will be corrected. Can we have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the minutes of the 8th? Thank you so much, Honorable Mamaracha. Who is struggling to hear you. Okay. That will be corrected, Honorable Mosodi. Yes.
Move for adoption.
Okay. No, we got that, Honorable Mamaracha. Can we have a seconder for the confirmation of the minutes of the 8th of February? I see there are 2 hands. I don't know if they are all hands.
I second the adoption, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you so much. Any contrary view? Not. If you can lower your hand, Honorable Dang. Anything else, Ms. Solomons?
Yes, Chair, these are the last sets of minutes, Chair. The only item left is the public hearing report. That lengthy report, that's the only item left, Chair. But beyond that, we've done all the minutes and the other reports that we needed to do today.
Oh, okay. Okay. Can we? Yeah, it's a big report, this one. I think we should, because you have given it to members. So it's got 56 pages.
Yes, Chair. It was circulated to members last week, Chair.
Okay. Let's do this, honorable members. Can we then, all those who are voting in favor of the adoption of this report, raise their hands?
Honorable Mosodi, vote in favor. Honorable Chairperson, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Chair, those members who have voted in favor of the report, it's yourself, Honorable Dango, Honorable Memang, Honorable Mashodi, Honorable Mamarahane, and Honorable Duduvu. Those are the members who have voted in favor of the report, Chair.
Thank you so much. Can I ask the honorable members to lower their heads? One of the culprits. Honorable Duduvu, can you please lower your head? Thank you very much. I think we're done with the voting now.
Yes,
So-
Chair, it also we must also capture those members who are voting against.
Oh, sorry, those who voting against. Mind is sorry, honorable team, honorable Boshoff, honorable Jacob.
So yes, Chair, there's these 3 members who have voted against the report. That will be Honorable Boshoff, Honorable Prataseth, and Honorable Lunt.
Thank you very much. Are there any abstention? If you can lower your hand, honorable Jacob. Thank you. Is there anyone voting against or in favor? Not. Okay, if you can, the next item then will be the report of the compensation fund. As we indicated in one of the meetings during the public hearings, instead of getting a submission on the bill, there was a complaint from one of the stakeholders, I think quite Link, about the notice that was issued by the compensation fund immediately after the conclusion or adoption of the bill by the National Assembly Portfolio Committee.
Telefoon aan, want ons gaan 10 teen 1 weer nou vote teen die Koida bill, hoor.
Honorable Bishop, if you can please mute. So we receive a legal opinion from the parliamentary legal advisor on the matter. But in terms of our resolution, we decided that we should also give the opportunity to the compensation fund to report on the matter, because the complaint was such that the notice was in a way undermining the bill on COIDA, and especially the amendments that were made by the portfolio committee. We approached then the compensation commission. There is a report that was submitted to us. I don't know if you can make it, or I don't know if Mr. Pazia, you got the report, or maybe Mr. Matava would like to get the sharing rights so that he can take us through the report. Welcome, Mr. Mafata, sorry.
Chair, Enrico has got the report. Enrico, can you please share the screen?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to the Chairperson and good afternoon to the honorable members, the Deputy Minister, and my colleagues. Chair, it's the PowerPoint presentation. You just share the.
So they have not given you the right. Mr. Pazia will be flighting the presentation. Or they've given you the the hosting
Okay,
rights.
you've given me the
You
hosting
can do
rights,
it
Chair.
yourself, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly do that. Thank you, Chair. So I'll just then be giving a brief to the committee on what the notice was all about and what was the rationale for the notice, and how that notice, and indicate how that notice was issued in terms of the current COID legislation and other supporting legislations that we have to comply with as a public entity of the Department of Employment and Labor. Chair, so my presentation is just going to cover 4 areas. It's a quick presentation, Chair. So just briefly remind of the role players that are in the COID claim who are compensated and have been defined in the current legislation. What the problem statement is of what the notice was trying to address, and what was the legislative mandate that assists us, that we used to be able to come up with a solution that we were proposing in the notice. And also just explain what in that notice we're talking about, the account verification system that we've implemented and what that is briefly, Chair. So it's just, I think this slide was also in the previous presentation, just to indicate these are the role players. You've got the employer, the hospitals, or the treating practitioners or physicians and allied health practitioners, the injured worker, as well as the compensation fund, who then work together to make sure that they work for the interest of the injured worker who's in the workplace. So any notices, any regulations and administrative notices that we issue them as part of the process of administering this legislation and making sure that those that are meant to benefit from the compensation fund do benefit from it, and there isn't any risks to the compensation that they're entitled to. If I go to, so going to the problem statement, so over the last 10 years, the fund's internal control environment has been found to be highly ineffective by the Auditor General of South Africa. And this has resulted in the fund getting a number of disclaimed audit opinions. And part of the processing of administering of benefits is one of those areas where such inadequacies have been identified by the AG. And the internal control environment with regards to how we process claims has been found to be wanting. And in the last financial year, also it has been no different. If you read the annual report of the compensation fund, the Auditor General says a couple of things about the administrative weaknesses with regards to payment of benefits. And some of these weaknesses also leads to opportunities for fraud share, where beneficiaries are often deprived of their benefits as a result of fraudulent activities by external parties who then intercept some of these payments. And in some of these cases, we find that money can be diverted from the fraudulent to fraudulent bank accounts, and then this prejudices the vulnerable workers and pensioners who are then dependent on the compensation fund as a source of income. So this, in the main, is part of the issues that we have with the control environment that have contributed to some of these weaknesses that have been identified. So in order to address some of these challenges, we implemented a new claims management system in 2019. And this claims system had the adequate and required systems of internal control. However, we have been continuously then improving that system. And as part of the efforts to continue to strengthen the systems of internal control, we implement an account verification system on the 1st of October, 2021. So this process enables us to be able to verify banking details via the different banking providers in South Africa prior to payment of any benefits, right? To ensure that when we do pay claims, we pay claims to the correct beneficiaries as contained in our system, as well as making sure that if it's a payment that needs to go to a pensioner, the payment does indeed goes to a bank account that belongs to a pensioner. If it has to be a payment that must go to a medical service provider that treated the patient or the injured worker, the money then does indeed go to that particular person. If it's money that needs to be reimbursed back to the employer for having paid the salaries of the worker for the period that the worker was going through medical treatment, then that payment does indeed go to that particular worker. And the system is able to detect if the details as they appear on the banking platforms of the bank that the client banks with differs from those details that the fund has, then it automatically blocks the payments. We then have to investigate and get the, either if it's a data inconsistencies on our side, we have to correct it. If it is with the client, we then get the client to correct the banking information, and then then we can be able to release the payments. And that's how we then have implemented the system of internal control and making sure that we then safeguard payments that go to clients. When we look at the legislative mandate behind why we've implemented some of these controls, Chair, the Public Finance Management Act is a law that all of us, organs of states, have to comply with. Public entities of that reports to government departments also have to comply with the Public Finance Management Act. And now in terms of Section 51, an accounting authority for a public entity must ensure that the entity has and maintains effective, efficient, and transparent systems of financial and risk management and internal control. And further down in the same clause in the legislation, Section 51(2), subsection B, subsection Roman figure 2, it says that an accounting authority for a public entity must take effective and appropriate steps to prevent irregular expenditure, losses resulting from criminal conduct, and expenditure that is not complying with operational policies of the public entity. So this is the fiduciary responsibility that an accounting authority has. And the accounting authority in the case of the compensation fund is the Director General, who then delegates some of his functions and responsibilities to the Commissioner. Section 57 of the Public Finance Management Act, subsection A, also talks about, gives responsibilities of all other officials that are employed in a public entity. And it says that an official in a public entity must ensure that the system of financial management and internal control is established for that particular entity and is carried out within their area of responsibility. And subsection C of the same section also says that an official in that public entity must take effective and appropriate steps to prevent, within that official's area of responsibility, any irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and any other collection of revenue. So this is the primary legislation that governs how we utilize funds in the state. And we have a responsibility then to make sure that we implement the systems of internal control. If you go further to the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, as amended by the legislation of 1997. So if we go to Section 4, subsection F and Roman figure 5, it says that subject to provisions of this act, the Director General shall decide on any question relating to the amount and, importantly, the manner of payment of compensation. Further in that section, subsection I, Roman figure 2, it says that subject to provisions of this act, the Director General shall decide upon the reasonableness of the cost of medical aid and the amount and manner of payment of such costs. Section 6A talks about the responsibilities of the Commissioner. And it says that this particular clauses of the legislation are in the COID Act as it stands and are not being amended in the COID Amendment Bill as well. So it says that except for transferring the responsibilities of the DG to the Commissioner in the COID Amendment Bill. So it says that the Commissioner shall, by notice in the Government Gazette, prescribe rules referred to in Section 56, subsection 3C. So Section 76 deals with increased compensation. But it also goes further to say, as well as the forms to be used and the particulars to be furnished in connection with notice of occupational injuries and diseases, claims for compensation, and then it also says, or any other form or matter which he or she may deem necessary for the administration of this act. So in administering the COID legislation, we process claims, we pay claims, we adjudicate on claims, and we register claims, and we assess employers, and we do also those things. And the law says that for any matter, we may publish a notice where we then, for anything that we then deem necessary. And I think it's against this background, Chair, that the notice that was referred to by COID Link was published in October. And if you go to Section 32, subsection A, subsection B, and subsection C of the COIDA, It says that notwithstanding anything to the contrary, in any other law contained, compensation shall not be ceded or pledged, be capable of attachment to any form of execution, and be set off against any debt of the person entitled to the compensation. And now this relates to payment of claims to the injured workers. So with the account verification system, Chair, this is an integrated interface with banks, where for real-time processing, as we send a claim for payment to the bank, it then goes through this particular interface to verify banking details with whichever bank that the client banks with. And if the information, there is a mismatch of this, and these are individuals, employers, medical service providers, and employees, there has to be a match between the details on the system that we have, as well as the detail on the bank system. The ID number, the name must match, the ID number must match if it's a company, the company name as well as the company registration name that needs to match. And with medical service providers, we go on also to compare the practice number as required in terms of the practice code numbering system. So when there is no match, then the system would automatically then freeze the payment. Then somebody then has to then investigate to make sure that we comply fully with the PFMA in terms of making sure that we implement controls and systems to make sure that the organization doesn't suffer any losses, because in an event that a payment goes to the wrong person, is intercepted, or is paid to the wrong person, we still have an obligation to pay money to the right person. So it would mean then the money that is paid to an incorrect person is a fruitless and wasteful expenditure, which would then have to be recovered somehow. And that also then shows the neglect on the part of the management of the fund, the accounting authority, in this case, the DG. And you'd know, Chair, I think in terms of the amended powers of the Auditor General, if the accounting authority has not implemented appropriate steps to prevent losses and to prevent any fruitless and wasteful expenditure as well as regular expenditure, they can have a reason to account in terms of the amended Public Audit Act. And because of such requirements, we then have to implement systems that make sure that we safeguard the money of the claimants. So, Chair, we issued a notice in October 2019. We had initially issued a notice much earlier. In the notice, we're basically informing the claimants that we will be implementing this particular system from the 1st of October, which we have been implementing since the 1st of October. There were some challenges in terms of some of the stakeholders that were not happy with the notice. We then issued a notice again on the 19th of October, providing the opportunity to all the stakeholders to give comments in terms of our intentions of wanting to enforce this particular notice, where we were saying that from a point where we do make that decision, we will not pay money into any nominated accounts, but we'll only pay money into the account of the person who is the claimant of the fund. And in this case, it's either a medical service provider, a claimant or the injured worker, or the employer if the money has to go to the employer for the reimbursement of the salaries that they've paid during the time when the person was getting salaries while he was on sick leave. So we have received the comments from in terms of the notice that we've published. We are evaluating them with the legal team, and we consulting where necessary, and then we will make a decision on whether we fully enforce this in terms of not even dealing with any exceptions. If a payment fails an exception, then has to go back and the corrections has to be made, or where it does not fail the exceptions, then we then basically pay the claim to the bank account. Chair, that's in a nutshell what the notice was all about and what informed the notice that we published on the 19th of October. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for the briefing. Let me now invite honorable members for comments. I see the hand of Honorable Apleni, Honorable Boshoff. In that order, please. Honorable Apleni.
Thanks, Chair. No, Chair. Firstly, let me apologize for the video.
Yeah.
Alfred Nzo Richie.
Yeah, we can also hear that you also have a network problem.
The network becomes a on this side. But Chair,
I think we've lost you now, Honorable Aplin.
yes, Chair.
Yeah, we keep on losing you.
I must that's the technical things that have achieved us. Oh, I'm so sorry, Chair. The network. I was saying, Chair, we must appreciate the legal. While we listen to the submissions made by the code link, I think I must admit it sounded like technical things that unless you deal with issues of injuries on duty and claims, it was not easy to understand, Chair. However, I must admit to my limited understanding, I understood code link to be saying that their worry is the Gazette notice will interrupt their businesses in a way that they will have to close, and this kind of damage is difficult to repair as these businesses were built over the number of years. And they wanted us as members of the Chair of Parliament to intervene because they think this will undermine the COIDA bill once it is an act. However, Parliament legal team is correct. This is just a bill, Chair, for now, and we cannot order the commissioner to withdraw. Sihlalo ukuba besiqhubisana ke nomnye nje umbutho ndicinga uba bekungalula kakhulu ukuba siwuthathe nje lo ingxaki ke nalo mbutho yengxowa yezonxephezelo ekufanele ke person siyayazi ukuba ngabana yenye entities kwezi 18 ezithe zafumanise ukuba noko indlela eziphatha ngayo imali ezinikwayo indlela engatshongo kakuhle ncam ndicinga uba ke singakumbi kuloba kakhulu ke sihlalo kukuba ukhomishine imibuzo ngolileyo ngqo ndicinga uba ke enye yezinto ibithe ke yaphakanyiswa ngugxa wam kwenye yekomiti leyo ibonakalisa okokuba ukhomishina kukhona imibuzo athi xa iphendula angayiphendule ngendlela ecacileyo ngqo. Nditsho ke nomphathiswa uqobo ngethuba evele phaa kulaa komiti yeskopa watsho ngokuphandle esihlalo ukuba ngabana ininzi into engalunganga ncakasana ngalo mthetho wenziwayo kungoko efuna uphando olucacileyo lweenkcukacha. Ndicinga okokuba ngabana ke sihlalo uba ngabana zizinto ezininzi zibe ziyazicompromise. So Chair, I think can we please have clear answers from Unantsiku Commissioner? The answers that a man on the street could understand clearly. Now I have two questions, Chair. The first one is that, did the commissioner undertake any form of study to see how the Gazette will impact businesses like Code Link, especially job losses? Okwesibini sihlalo umbuzo wami uthi njengoko sisazi kokuba ngabana amashishini afana ke no-Code Link amashishini okudala khona sekuyiminyaka emininzi ekhona. ukomishina akasakwazi na okokuba ngaba alinde okokuba ibe iyagqitywa le bill phambi kokuba kube khona ezi zinto azifakelelwa azenzayo izoba noko igqibekile ukwenzeka kakuhle kunento yoba ukuthi abe ufakelela izinto ezininzi. Andazi ke noba sakhe okokuba sinxaxhile uyacacisela ngokuphandle kokuba ngaba kuzoba sonke kwipage ukuze kuthi ke uba ngaba ndiyabulela Sihlalo.
Yeah, thank you very much. Though we're struggling here and there because of network challenges. Honorable Boshoff, followed by, I don't know if Honorable Dango has dropped his hand because I don't see it anymore, but Honorable Boshoff will be followed by Honorable, Dango is back, Honorable Dango, and then Honorable Moimang, in that order, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. For the sake of everybody hearing me, I will not put on my video. What I would like to know, Chair, from Mr. Mafata are the following. In the first instance, why were the banking notice regulations not introduced as part of the COIDA bill? We know that it was first published in September and then withdrawn, and then 615 and 616 was introduced. I just want to bring to your attention that we must keep in mind that I don't think anybody will have problems with having to verify their bank details. But the problem is we must note that a lot of documentation is required by the compensation fund to change or register a bank account with them. Then I would like to know as well is, why are the banking notice regulations necessary if one takes into consideration that all third parties will be required to register with a compensation fund in terms of the COIDA bill that is currently on the table? And then I would also like to know, will the banking notice regulations specifically aimed at medical claims be removed or withdrawn? And let me just carry on. And will the compensation fund then only be dealing with fully registered and compliant third parties? Let me just see here. I'd like to know from Mr. Mafata, what is the actual and or estimated value of payments made to incorrect beneficiaries of the compensation fund for the past 3 financial years? I'd also like to know from him whether his fund and the department have done a cost versus benefit analysis for the implementation of this system to pay the correct beneficiaries, and can it be made available? And I know that the commissioner is aware of businesses of pre-funders. Can he give me his view on how he believes these notices will impact on the following stakeholders in the future: medical service providers and pre-funders? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Boshoff. Honorable Dango.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Chairperson, I think the regulations are very clear. They exclude third parties. Now, I don't see the reason why people should be making a profit or a margin between a client who is the person that has been injured and the compensation fund. The compensation fund will pay out to the person who's been injured. But I had asked the question of both the people that had come as to what their margins were and why they were involved in this particular position, because there's only two parties involved: the compensation fund and the person injured, and the company where the person was involved. So to introduce another party is adding another cost onto what would be paid out to the person who was injured. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Moima.
Let me also welcome the presentation and go straight to the question that I want to raise, which to me it's more related to probably the one of the issues that was raised. Of course, mindful of the reflection that was made in the problem statement around the fund's internal control environment, the importance of processing and administration of bills, but also appreciating the challenges that are there with in relation to the internal control environment. But more than that, critical to that is the enabling legislation that was raised by the commissioner in relation to areas of emphasis that are placed in terms of the Public Finance Management Act with regard to the accounting authority. But more than that, appreciating the point raised by the commissioner in relation to, I think, slide 10, where he categorically spell out how the commissioner exercise is correctly captured and enabled by section 53C. The only question that I want to raise, appreciating the fact that this notice in terms of section 6AB was mainly aimed at dealing with the issue of account verification system, the integration of it, the verification, but also the need to ensure that there is a matching between the worker that is injured, but also the details in the system. The question that I want to pose is all these key areas that are outlined prior to the amendment, because I think the key area of concern was the issue of timing, which created an impression on the part of the stakeholder that somehow the commissioner is jumping the gun. What was the situation before? Why did the commissioner had to wait for the NA to finalize to pass the bill, and then thereafter publish the notice in terms of the Government Gazette? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Honorable Boso, follow-up question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. I would just like to know, I remember ASISA giving us a responding to everything, and they wrote to us as well with regard to sections 28 and 78 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act 9 of 2017. And if you go to section 239, I haven't seen anything with regard to their request in the compensation funds presentation. But if you go to section 239 of the Constitution, they speak of an organ of state has the same meaning ascribed to it in terms of section 239 of the Constitution. And in sections 28 and 78 of the financial sector regulation, it requires the minister to consult with financial regulators before enacting any law that impacts the stability of companies within the financial services sector. I would like to know if this has been taken into consideration, and could he give us some feedback on that? And then, Honourable Chair, I don't know if I can address it here, but I think it's about time that we sat down and had a fully fledged meeting with the Compensation Fund, especially in light of the findings of the AG and the fact that there's a forensic investigation into the alleged corruption at the Compensation Fund. I know that a committee has been appointed and they're busy with the investigation, and I would like us to also have an opportunity to engage with the Compensation Fund on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Boshoff. Before we allow the Commissioner to respond, can I just check, Mr. Mafata, if there is any contradiction between what is currently in the bill and the notices, if there is any contradiction? Perhaps if I can even clarify it further. Does the bill, if it gets passed, has it got any effect on the notice that has been issued, or the gazette that has been issued? If you can clarify the relationship between the notice and the specific clause that CodeLink is complaining about. Thank you very much. I'll allow you to now respond.
Thank you, Chair.
Chairperson, before he responds, if I may just ask one question.
Okay.
The definition of financial services industry, are debt collectors by definition part of the financial services industry? Thank you.
Okay. You can go ahead, Mr. Mafat.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'll respond to the questions in the order that they were asked, and my colleagues are also with me in the meeting. If there's anything I miss, they will then also come in, Chair. So starting with Honorable Apuleni's questions, the connection was a bit breaking. I didn't hear much of what he was saying, but from the gist of what I heard him saying, the understanding that this is going to disrupt or interrupt the business of CodeLink. Chair, when we issued this notice, the intention was not to interrupt a business of anybody. So as officials in the public entity, we have a responsibility to safeguard assets of the state, and the monies that we pay to beneficiaries is also part of those assets. And our responsibility and obligation is towards making sure that we safeguard those assets. So there was no requirement for us to undertake any study of how this is going to impact, because this is basically about how you administer the payments to beneficiaries. I did indicate in that first slide showing how who are the main beneficiaries as defined in COIDA in terms of the legislation. You've got an employer, a medical service provider, as well as a claimant. And we have a responsibility towards these three groups of people. So we cannot wait for until the bid is completed, because, Chair, we have an organization that is currently in operation. There is a requirement for us to make sure that everything that we do complies with the PFMA, complies with the law. We cannot say that we defer compliance to the PFMA until such time that the new bill is there, or we are delaying compliance to the PFMA because it's going to cause somebody to go out of business. And that's not the intention of the bill at all. We have many third parties, many administrators who assist doctors, who assist injured workers, and then don't operate the way that COID-Link and COMSOL operates, for example. The two organizations that presented before the committee. So Honorable Boshoff asked the question. I think with Honorable Aplain, he mentioned a number of things that were discussed at the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, and it's precisely because of some of these weaknesses in our controlled environment that has led to some of the audit outcomes that we have now. And our activities and a lot of the things that we do are aimed at making sure that we then correct those weaknesses in the controlled environment. The Honorable Boshoff asked why were they not published as part of the COIDA bill. So this particular clause, Chair, that would also maybe also respond to your question at the end. I mentioned a number of clauses in the COIDA legislation which are not being changed in the COIDA amendment bill. So the responsibilities of the DG, the only change that happens is that these responsibilities now become the responsibilities of the Commission. That's the only change that is there. The responsibilities of the Commission in terms of Section 6A, they are still there. So they are not being amended in the bill at all. So there's no contradiction, and so it would not even, once the COIDA amendment bill is passed into law, it's not going to have an impact on this administrative process of verifying the engine details that we've put in place. So the notice will not be withdrawn or removed, Chair. We've given an opportunity as part of the consultation process. We gave an opportunity to the stakeholders to give their comments and give us their view on our notice. And as I said, we're assessing this, and it will then help us to be able to make a final decision on whether we are fully enforcing this or we're going to allow exceptions and deal with those exceptions as and when necessary. The information of incorrect payments made to beneficiaries, Chair, that information we will make available to the committee. I don't have the numbers with me, Chair. I also cannot comment on ASISA and their submission, Chair. We are not bound by the legislation that they refer to. Our responsibility and the legislation that we derive our mandate from is the COIDA, as well as the PFMA that we then need to comply with in discharging our responsibilities in the administration of COIDA. We've noted the comments from Honorable Dango, and I think the issue also of the debt collectors, I'm not sure, I know they're governed by the Debt Collectors Act, but I do not know to what extent are the debt collectors governed by the Financial Services Act, Chair. I heard for the first time in this committee that the two organizations are debt collectors because they describe themselves to the portfolio committee as pre-funders. So I would not have any knowledge of their debt collecting responsibilities. The Honorable Moimang also then asked why didn't we wait for the passing of the bill? I think because this relates to the current legislation as it stands. So that's why whether we waited for the bill or not, we still have a responsibility to make sure that we implement controls in the organization, and that is why. And when you look at the fact that I think the coincidence is that we finalized the project at the end of August, beginning of September, and then we then implemented it from the 1st of October. But this is all part of the process. We started a process in 2018 to develop a new system. We completed the development of the new system in November 2019. We then allowed for a period of stabilization and to get users to get familiar with the system, and then we started with enhancements to the system. One of the first enhancements that we then did was this account verification system once the payment platform had stabilized. And I think that's just why the timing may appear to be happening around the time that the portfolio committee had just completed the dealing with the COIDA amendment bill. Chair, I think I've responded to all the questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moffat. I don't know if there are any follow-up questions. Seems now to accept the two old hands. I think in terms of the way forward that was advised by the Parliament legal advisor. He gave us the advice, but also he suggested that we can go ahead and invite the compensation fund to report to us. But the second part that he raised was that it is not our role as a committee when there are complaints about a gazette by the department and other things to deal with such as a committee. The role, though he didn't want to commit himself in terms of acting as if he's a legal advisor of the stakeholders. He mentioned the fact that what the stakeholders could do is to write to the minister if they have any complaints, but if they're not satisfied with the response or lack of response from the part of the minister, they can go to court so that whatever notice or gazette could be set aside. We cannot play a role of being a court as a committee. But also, just to add that if there are any, that this is what also Shamara also indicated, that it is not our role to take up issues of complaint by stakeholders. They have other avenues to take up their complaints. But also there's a committee that deals with petitions and executive undertakings that anyone or from the public can use. I think Honorable Dodovu is here, and he also participate in that particular committee where they deal with the petitions from anyone from the public. So that's one part. The other part, there are issues that are raised by members that have nothing necessarily to do with this particular complaint by CodeLink, but generally with the fund itself, how it operates, issues of administration, funds handling. Those are other normal issues that we should be dealing with as a committee, where we then invite the fund to come and report, maybe as part of the annual performance plan, and maybe as part of the annual report, or to brief us on a specific issue that we are interested in as a committee that form part of the plans of the entity as to how they are implementing a particular program within the performance plans of the entity. So those are the issues that we should then as a committee follow them up in our normal committee work. So we need to make sure that when we adopt a report, a term plan for the committee, we include the compensation fund, not only the compensation fund, but also other entities and the departments that we interact with from time to time. Perhaps our mistake as a committee is that we're more focused on the departments rather than entities. There are a lot of entities of not only Department of Employment and Labor, but all the other departments that we oversight as a committee. Small Business Development has its 2 entities. DTIC got lots of entities. Some of them we've never invited them before the committee. So perhaps we need to start also focusing on these entities as well. So I'm trying to say that some of the issues are issues that we could have picked up in our committee oversight work, which are separate from this particular issue of that emanated from the bill, but also the notice that that has been issued by compensation fund. So I'm in all is that we will then follow up with the entity on their plans, how they implement their plans, perhaps in the form of a quarterly report or in-year report. Thank you very much, honorable members. We now move to the next two items. So the first one will be the annual report 2020-2021 annual report. I have received a WhatsApp message from the DG. He's got an emergency at home. His mother has been hospitalized. So he has asked the COO to stand in for him and take us through the report. Over to you, COO.
Thank you, Chairperson. Excuse me, if I could ask that Matapelo be given the sharing rights so that she can help me with the presentation, I would appreciate that. But whilst that is being done.
So, sorry, just hold on there, COO. Let me just say there are stakeholders that came when we were dealing with the two bills. Now I don't want them for them to be in the meeting if they are done with the issues that they came from. I don't want to arrest them to be in the meeting. So I want to just thank them, but it's up to them if they want to continue with the meeting. The Office of the Chief State Law Advisor, the Parliament Legal Officer, and perhaps some members of the department who only came for the two bills. But as I'm saying, it's up to them to remain in the meeting. But we would like to thank them for their participation throughout since we started on the 22nd of, in fact, we started last year when the department was briefing us on the two bills. The two legal advisors were here, one for the employment equity, other one for COIT. And also the office of the state law advisor was with us throughout. So we'd like to thank them. But if they want to continue listening on the annual report and also on the migration policy, they can do so. But for now, I would like to thank them for their attendance and participation throughout. Sorry for interrupting here, so you can continue.
Thanks, Chair. As I was saying, whilst Matapelo gets the sharing rights, I would like to just say that present with me today here are the Deputy Directors General responsible for the different programs. And I have also thought it good to invite the heads of the provinces of the department so that questions that are to be asked of provincial performance can be directed directly to the officials who head the provinces and the provincial operations. So it's quite a number of people, but during the presentation or afterwards when there are questions, if you would not mind me directing it to the relevant person. And no then problem. With your indulgence, Chairperson, I would also like to, when we get to the performance, the financial performance, allow the CFO to do the presentation, because by then I think you'll be tired of my voice. And then also allow the CEO of the newly appointed CEO of SEE to do the presentation for SEE, so that members can also get to know him a little bit better. The rest of us are old hands, people who've been here for some time, so it's always nice to see the new functionaries in specific areas of work. Chairperson, thank you for the opportunity of doing this presentation. This is the audited annual performance for the year 2021. And this presentation was circulated quite some time ago, sometime last week. So I'm not going to go through each and every slide. There are 82 of them, and it'll take the whole afternoon then and not allow time for questions and discussions. I'm going to look at the slides then, which I feel might add some value in terms of provincial performance, seeing that this committee focuses on performance, or is interested, let me say that, on the provincial performance of the operations of the department. So in terms of the first slide is just, Matapelo, if we can move to the next slide, please.
Can I give you 30 minutes for the whole report, including the financial part?
I'll move. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much.
So I'm going to look at our overall achievements, look at the comparative analysis for the whole financial year, then look in a little bit more detail at the performance of these different programs of the department, and then finances and also SEE. So I will take 15 minutes, and the two gentlemen can share the other 15 minutes amongst themselves. So the first slide is slide 8, where we look at the legend of the department in terms of performance. We only use 2 colors. Anything that has been achieved 100% and above gets a green, which means it's completed, and anything below 99% is not completed or not achieved. You will recall, Chairperson, that some time ago we also used the amber light, but we decided as a department either we've done it or we haven't done it, and we reflect as such. On slide 9, we have the first quarter's performance, where the members can see that our achievement was lying at 25%. And you will also recall that was the very hard lockdown that we had. And as a service department, that is clearly reflected here in our performance. Quarter 2's performance was lying at 48%. There we started creeping out of the hard lockdown. In terms of quarter 3, if we can just move to quarter 3, you will see on the next slide, our performance was lying at 64%. And then we ended the financial year with a 67% achievement in quarter 4. The overall annual performance on slide 11 was 66%. Matapelo, I don't know if you have a time lag there with you, but members have received the presentation. So we ended the year at 66%. Not as good as the preceding years, as you will soon see when I do that presentation. I would like to then focus on the performance of the specific programs. Before I do that, on slide 13, I have performance trends, and you will see from the financial year 2019-20, where our performance ended the year close to 90%, 89%, we fell to 25% in the first quarter of 2021 with the hard lockdown, and then slowly creeped up in terms of performance again. So let's look at the annual performance on slide 14 of the different programs that are funded by Vote 21. Administration managed to achieve an overall achievement of 25%. Inspection and enforcement services managed 50% achievement. Public employment services managed 83% achievement. Labor policy and industrial relations managed a 90% achievement. And this program is responsible for policy development and then for transfers of funding to Netlake and CCMA in their performance plan. Then the end performance, 66% achievement of our indicators as per our annual performance plan. Chairperson, on slide 15, I'm just giving a little bit of a breakdown in terms of the provincial performance. This is quarter 1 and quarter 2. I would like to focus on quarter 4, which is on the next slide. Now, for inspection and enforcement services, our performance is cumulatively measured, which means the performance at the end of the year then gives us reflection of what has happened during the course of the year, what has happened in terms of the indicators for the year. You will see that there were only 3 provinces that have achieved all the indicators for the inspection services. These are Eastern Cape, followed by Free State, and then Western Cape. And the others in between are lying at a 67% achievement. If we look at public employment services, the performance there on slide 18 for Q4, here we have Eastern Cape lying at 100%. And if I remember correctly, this is the only province that has achieved 100% for both public employment services and the inspection and enforcement services, followed by Limpopo and Northern Cape. The other provinces lying at 75% performance. I would like to look now a little bit at the programs, because the provincial performance feed into the programs and their performance. Although the program administration has a substantial number of policies and so forth, as you will see when we start. You will recall that I said that this program achieved 25% of the indicators, and on slide 21, Chair, and I will, with your indulgence, only focus on the areas of non-achievement. One of our problems were the filling of vacancies, filling of the funded posts within 4 months of becoming vacant. Here you will see that we have only achieved 28% of these versus an 80% indicator. And here it is because of a large number of applications that we receive, and the resources, this internal process which is prescribed, and we are having difficulty in terms of capturing all the applications as per the time frame set for ourselves. The next slide talks about the review of our sexual harassment policy. Here we've had a number of internal delays with submitting this to our departmental bargaining chamber, so that our stakeholders, particularly organized labor, can make inputs and sign off on it. So it's come and it's gone, and it's come and it's gone. So we've had a number of delays in terms of finalizing this in terms of the consultation process. If we look at ICT services, one of the two indicators here was achieved in terms of the systems availability, where we've had a 92% systems availability versus the 90% as we indicated to ourselves. But the development of our new state-of-the-art system, the SAP system, is being delayed by various processes. And this, amongst others, was at that time the lockdown and the fact that not everyone was available to do the work as it was expected to happen. On slide 24, we also had the ethics at that time. The ethics strategy and management plan was in draft form, although we have had compliance obligations in these that were carried to the next financial year. Chairperson, the resolution of corrupt incidents or incidents of corruption in the department, we set ourselves a 90% resolution of these incidents by either disciplinary or criminal measures or interventions. We could only finalize 63% of these. And it's because often of the complicated nature of these cases that we have to refer them to specialists outside. We have to refer them to other parties to assist us with the resolution thereof. And that impacts on the conclusion of the cases. On slide 26, we've had at that time the elimination of irregular and unauthorized expenditure. We have had 32 million rand irregular expenditure, and I'm sure the CFO will talk about it a little bit in more detail when he does his presentation. We had no unauthorized expenditure detected and reported. On the next slide, there was fruitless and wasteful expenditure to the value of 727,000 rands. And also the CFO will talk about this when he does his presentation on the finances in a little bit more detail. In terms of inspection and enforcement services, Program 2, the area of non-achievement here was the number of inspections. We had a target of 188,323, and we managed to achieve 178,489 inspections. And this was as a direct result of the non-availability of employers and workplaces in which to inspect. However, of the employees that were expected, on the next slide, we have served 99% of those that were not compliant with relevant notices. If I can ask you to move to slide 32, please, Matapelo. On slide 32, we have non-achievement of hospitality sector seminars. Again, this was the result of the non-availability and the lockdowns in the pandemic. We had specific targets for specific peer timeframes. Matapelo, if we can move to slide 33. Chairperson, slide 33, I see there's a problem with the system, so I'm going to ask members if they wouldn't mind to just follow on their copies of the presentation. On slide 33, you will see the provincial performance. In terms of employment equity procedural inspections, we were short with 827 inspections. And in terms of DG review inspections, we were short with 29 inspections. In terms of the other legislation, occupational health and safety, the only province that did not achieve, and this is on slide 35, was Gauteng, who was short with nearly 800 inspections. Chairperson, on my side, I cannot see the presentation, but I'm going to proceed and assume that members can follow with their copies. Is that acceptable?
We also can see the presentation.
Oh,
You know what happened.
Perhaps then if Matapelo is not there, if the Secretariat could then share. I saw that they also had hosting rights, Chair.
It was on, but then it was removed.
Yeah, it disappeared. It disappeared. There we go. Thank you very much. Thanks. I'm on slide 35.
Yeah, slide number, if you can.
35.
35. Slide number 35, yeah. Mr. Bazia.
Thank you. Technology is wonderful until there's things like this happen. On slide 35, as I was saying, I was looking at the performance in terms of inspection services, and here the province of Gauteng has underperformed in terms of occupational health and safety inspections. On slide 36, here we look at inspections in terms of the COID Act, and you will see that here there was a substantial number of inspections. If you can move to slide 36, please. Substantial number, more than what was originally planned in terms of compensation, the inspections for the COID Act. If we look at public employment services on slide 38, although there were a number of provinces that did not achieve the aggregated performance for public employment services, were all achieved. So here we saw that this program achieved all the performance indicators in terms of registration of work seekers, counseling, placement, etc. There's only one area which they're lacking, and that's on slide 39. And this is the area of the policy which is not finalized. I think you are aware how far the policy is in terms of the employment policy specifically. On slide 40, we give the provincial breakdown, Chair, and I see my time is running out, so I'm just going to focus on provinces who have not achieved. KZN and Western Cape did not manage to register the number of work seekers that were expected of them to register, whilst all the other provinces achieved that, as well as the opportunities. In terms of employment counselling, it was Free State who did not succeed in counselling the number of people on slide 41, thank you. And then also Western Cape again, which did not do what was expected of them in terms of the counselling. In terms of public employment services, the figures, the slides, quite a number of them give us more detailed breakdown in terms of registration of work seekers. So I'm just going to briefly look at them. On slide 41, 51% of our work seekers that are registered with us are young people in the age 15 to 35. So by far the majority of the people who we register are below that age group. And then 2,438 of the work seekers that were registered on our system are people with disabilities. I would like to talk about the work seekers placed. I just want to go to that slide. That will be on slide 53. If the Secretariat can just move to slide 53, I would appreciate that. So we have placed 37,193 work seekers in work and learning opportunities, of which 57% were in formal jobs. 26% were in projects, 9% were in the UIF labor activation programs, and 7% were in learnerships. Then, Chair, if we can look at the slide 57, you will recall that I said earlier 51% of work seekers are young people between the ages of 15 and 35. Of the numbers that we have placed in employment, 71% were young people. So although the registration is only 51%, we have managed to place a full 71% of the placements that took place was made by or was done by young people of the ages below 35. Labor policy and industrial relations is the program that deals with, as I said earlier, policies, amendments, and so forth. So on slide 62, we get a sense of the Employment Amendment Bill. I'm sorry, Chair, but I see the presentation is not moving. So I'm sorry for that. Members will have to follow the last few slides. The Employment Amendment Bill has been tabled and it was gazetted in July 2020. The rest of the matters were all achieved by this branch except for our one labor market trend report, which was produced a little bit late because of the fact that we did not have people in access to the information that was done. Chair, I think that takes care of the performance part of the presentation. If you will allow me, on slide 71, there's an indication of our performance versus the money
can
that...
Can you just hold on, Mr. Basna, can you please, I don't know what's happening. This slide keep on disappearing. What is the problem, see?
Sorry, you got indicated that he got kicked out of the meeting, but we did make Matapelo a co-host as requested by Ms. Brockhurst, but I have readmitted Enrico and made him a co-host again. So if you can maybe just pick up where Ms. Brockhurst... Can you
go to slide 71?
Thank you, Chair. It's slide 71. This is just a...
This one is 65. Or am I wrong? Slide 71, is that slide 71?
There is slide 71, Chair. Thank you very much. This is just to give us a sense of the expenditure versus the performance. You will see that administration has spent 92% of its allocated budget, and they have achieved 25% of the indicators. Inspection and Enforcement Services has spent 85%, and they achieved 50% of the indicators. Public Employment Services spent 98% of the allocation, and they achieved 83%. And Labour Policy and Industrial Relations spent 98%, and they achieved 90% on the indicators. And bear in mind that Labour Policy Industrial Relations is responsible for the transfer fees to Netflix.
I thought you were going to elaborate on this slide, the COO.
I think the CFO is going to elaborate, Chair, in terms of detail of this, unless you will want me to add something more, what it is, but he's going to talk about this.
No, I was just looking at the 25% achievement vis-a-vis the 92% expenditure.
Yeah.
But then you said the CFO will elaborate, okay.
Yeah. You will recall, Chairperson, that when I did the presentation for administration, these are the soft things where we had very people-intensive activities. And with people not being at work, it's very difficult to catch up the performance 2 months or 3 months down the line in terms of an annual performance plan. So that was one of the reasons why. Yet you still have to pay salaries. During this time, you still have to pay your IT equipment. Here, all our ICT equipment, all our data, everything is defrayed against the budget of administration. And with the meetings all taking place online, etc., it was quite a substantial increase in spend because of that factor. Jay, the next slide is the financial slide, slide 72. So I will hand over to the CFO to take us through in his time allocation. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you very much. CFO.
Thanks, Chair and honorable members. Our total budget allocation for the vote was 3.299 billion, of which as a department, all the programs combined spent 3.1, leaving the
if you can
variance.
also switch on your video, please. CFO?
Yes, Chair.
If you can switch on your video, please.
I have done that, Chair.
Oh, good.
But it's not.
No, I can see you now.
Oh, for me,
you can continue. You can continue, yes.
The expenditure was 3.1 billion, giving the available budget of 196 million. The administration, against the performance for the year, they spent 92.1%. IES, Inspection and Enforcement Services, 94.9% of the budget spent. Public Employment Services, 97.5% of the budget allocated to the program. And Labor Policy and Industrial Relations, they spent 98.4% of the budget allocation. However, what is assisting the Labor Policy and Industrial Relations is a majority of its budget that is transferred to CCMA and NETLAC. So it forms part of, that transfers from a major part of their budget. All in all, as a department for the year 2020 to 2021, we have spent 94.1% of the allocation, giving us an underspend of 5.9%. The same information, the next slide, in terms of the same information, but under economic classification on compensation of employees. The budget allocated was 1.3 billion, of which the expenditure was 1.224. The unspent amount, due to, as a major part of it, the vacancies was 127 million, giving the total expenditure on compensation of employees to be 96.6%. Goods and services, the budget allocation for the year was 555 million, of which the department spent 514, giving the variance of just about 40 million not spent. The total expenditure was 92.7%. Transfers and subsidies, the total allocation was 1.3 billion, of 1.314, of which the expenditure was 1.305, giving just the underspend to be just 9.5 million. And in percentage terms, the expenditure was 99.3%. Payments for capital assets, the budget allocated was 77.5 million, The expenditure against the allocated budget was 58.9, leaving the under expenditure to be 18.6. In percentage terms, the budget expenditure was 76%. The total expenditure allocation was just about 3.3, and the expenditure was 3.1, giving the 196 million underspent with a percentage of 94.1. The next slide. The next slide depicts the expenditure per province so that we can compare to the performance for each province. Eastern Cape, 98, the expenditure percentage was 98.9%, Free State, 90.3%, Gauteng, 93.4%, KwaZulu-Natal, 96.3% expenditure, Limpopo at 89.3%, Mpumalanga at 86.3%, Northern Cape at 79.7% expenditure, Northwest at 84.7%, Western Cape at 87.5%. The total expenditure for the provinces is 91% for the money allocated to the provinces. The next slide is the summary of the audit outcome for the department for the year 2020-2021. The department received an unqualified opinion for the regularity audit for the department with the emphasis of matter, the statement of the figures on note number 33 on the financial statements, and also the AG also highlighted the material underspent on the budget by program 2 inspection and enforcement services at 89%. In terms of there is also a detailed report on the irregular expenditure and authorized expenditure that has been submitted by the department, but just for the sake of time and also to give the colleague on SEE to do some presentation on their performance and the finances as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, CFO.
Thank you, Chair. The CEO for SEE is Mr. Sibusiso Pakati, and he will take us through the presentation for SEE. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Honorable Chairperson.
Yes. You can also switch on your video, please. There you go.
Thank you. Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, the administrative leadership of our department, colleagues, really, if we can just go to the next slide. But while we're still going to the next slide, if I could just elaborate, yes. If you look at 2020-21 financial year, that has been a very difficult year for SEE due to the difficult trading conditions. I mean, members would recall that that's basically the year where COVID-19 pandemic was greatly felt. However, if you look at SEE's performance, you look at the additional employment of people with disabilities, which is basically priority number 2 of the Ministerial Performance Agreement on economic transformation and job creation. You would find that despite the fact that we're operating in difficult conditions, and members would recall that a number of industries were retrenching, but SEE managed to meet the target of 25 people with disabilities in terms of additional opportunities. So hence we're saying that there's no variance there, and we also continue to make sure that we create more opportunities for people with disabilities in terms of jobs, I mean, despite the conditions. So basically, we managed to achieve that number, and we continue our efforts to make sure that we continue on the same trajectory. However, in terms of our sales performance, in terms of sales and of goods and services, you'd see a sharp decline of 67%. The target was 5%. Like I said, I mean, if you look at that, the period under review, there was really no aggregate demand, which because of the sharp decline in disposable incomes. So there was less spending. I mean, even if you look at the government departments that would normally give us support, I mean, there was really no support at all because of the reprioritization towards spending on COVID-19. So, and if you look at the reason why, the other reason why this sharp decline, you find that our furniture business, which is school furniture mainly, which is the highest profit margins in terms of our portfolio split, there was basically no sales because schools were closed. So there was no activity at all there, hence the sharp decline of minus 67%. However, we're saying that we actually are putting measures in place now because schools have opened and there are opportunities around that area. So I'm just explaining to members that so that they don't get a shock to see that it was basically the reality based on the conditions, very difficult trading conditions for every business that was actually in the business of selling anything during the same period under review. If we look at the number of customer agreements, the target was 3. We managed to achieve 2. Like I've just indicated, it was really difficult trading conditions, and we mentioned here that the decentralization of procurement to provincial departments made it very difficult for us because it meant that we also have to incur expenses of traveling to provincial departments. I mean anyone who would understand, because SEE has been operating on a deficit budget year on year, so it's been very, very difficult for us. But again, I can assure honorable members that we really streamlining a number of activities to make sure that we become better in the current year and the years coming. So that's basically the picture that was actually painted during the 2020-21 financial year. And I would request our CFO to take us through the numbers in the next 2 slides. Thank you, Chairperson.
Good afternoon. The next slides for the financial statements overview. We are just highlighting in that the key point is with regards to the financial or the budget that we get from National Treasury, which we consider to be a transfers and subsidies or grant allocation in this case. What we are just indicating as well is that the grant that we're getting is expected to be compensated by the salary, I mean the sales that we're supposed to be income generating throughout the factories. But as the CEO has just indicated, we've seen a big decline in the sales. That would mean that the grant was not compensated far enough to cover the salaries as well as the day-to-day running operations of the entity. And as a result, towards the financial year end, we had to knock on the doors of the department to request for the additional transfers and subsidies. In this case, we were then bailed out so that we can cover the payment of salaries for both the factory workers that we employ across the factories, as well as the administrative salaries that we incur. But then the portion of that was also earmarked for the ICT infrastructure. SEE has been operating on a very outdated ICT infrastructure. We are currently still in the process of having a service provider that will come and do an ICT enhancement on our system, which is the biggest contributing factor to most of the findings that we get through when we get audited by the Auditor General. The third point just illustrate that we then were not in a position to expand to the Mpumalanga province as a result of this financial constraints. That move or that expansion has been put in abeyance for now. The expenditure we are looking at, the highest expenditure that we incur, as I've indicated, is the salary cost for both factory workers and administrative officials, as well as the expenditure that is attributed to the manufacturing cost that goes into manufacturing overheads for these cells that we have to be generating. The program expenditure seemed to be less than what we had budgeted for. Of course, that is also attributed to the financial constraint that we have seen in 2020-2021 financial year. Next slide. Okay, so on the next slide, we're just trying to give more details in terms of the budgeted figures versus the actual amounts. We had initially budgeted 207 million, as you can see in that column there, but we only managed to collect 42 million of that, leaving us with a huge under collection, and obviously that impacts or affects on how the day-to-day running operations are being affected. In terms of the conditional transfers received, we budgeted 153 million as per the allocation from National Treasury, but that was then augmented with the bailout of 25 million plus the ICT that we had received. So it gives the picture that we have over collected in that instances. And on the interest as well, because of the fact that we have less cash reserves in the banks, we are not able to then generate expected interest on the cash reserves. Yes, the biggest contributors is on the cells. It's because of those minimum orders that we received in the financial year, and of course the bailout did come very handy in terms of being able to meet key obligations when it comes to the operations in the entity. Next slide, please. Okay, so our biggest expenditures, as we are highlighting here, is our salary bill. So the biggest challenge that we have as an entity is the fact that we have to be employing additional people with disabilities so that we can have them in the participating in the labor market. However, that because of the fact that we employ the additional people, we have to we carry the cost of the salaries, and in an instances where for the 2020-2021 financial year, where we have seen a decline in sales, it does put a lot of burden in terms of carrying a permanent expenditure for salaries, while we are not in a position to balance it with a generating of substantial revenue that have to cover those salaries. So essentially, we sit with a mandate of carrying a certain cost, and but we have to then find a way of, as the CEO has indicated, balancing that mandate, which becomes a challenge when we have to be dealing with a market that is very volatile at some of the periods. Admin support salaries is the salaries for the administrative officials. Currently, we have 159 officials that are supporting these factories, and as a result, their salaries are also coming out of the budget for the entity. And it's also one of those expenditures that we have to carry in throughout the financial year. As it stands,
it looks as if the administrative expenditure was budgeted for 45 million with an actual expenditure of 130. And if you look into the factory salaries, it says 130. So we just had to do the adjustment in that instances because of when we were accounting for factory salaries, the auditors had an issue of how we accounted for those salaries. So we had to move them into a different categories of the factory salaries, that we have to move them into the category of administrative salary, purely because of the fact that in the factory salaries category, we have to account for those that were involved in the production so that we can be aligned to the GRAP standards, that accounting standards that we are required to comply to. Basically, the salaries on the administrative salaries were not overspent. It's because of the move of the factory salaries that we had to then account under the administrative support salaries. Then on the manufacturing costs, again, we can only incur such high manufacturing costs if we have a volume of sales. Even though it looks like as if the actual expenditure is a bit lower, we incur as and when we get orders. Then on the operational cost, it was not a lot of expenses in the sense that we managed to stay within the less budget, but also this could be because of the financial constraints that we were facing. We're not able to execute a lot of day-to-day runnings and day-to-day operations. We had to be very conservative in terms of where to prioritize certain expenditures. Next slide, please. Okay, while we move on to the next slide, I will also just go through the one that I have on my side. The next slide deals with irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So here we are looking in terms of the fruitless and wasteful expenditure. We've had challenges with regards to the interest that we were being charged on municipal accounts. And one of the biggest reasons here was because of the fact that these buildings are belonging to the landlord, and as a result, we have to be getting these municipal accounts on a monthly basis. But in some instances, we do face challenges in getting those accounts, and we have to be relying on the municipalities sending us those accounts. But as a result, in some other cases, we end up paying those municipalities, or when we receive them a bit later, and they would have incurred interest already. But we have put measures into place, and if you look at 2019, 2020, compared to 2021, the amount has gone down because of the measures that we've put in place to register on the online platforms in municipalities that have these online platforms. But of course, there are still few that don't have the online platforms, where we still have to then rely on them, on the municipalities sending us these invoices. On the SARS penalty and SARS interest, we had a challenge in both years in incurring the SARS penalties. Firstly, in the 2019-2020 was due to the fact that after the acquisition of certain assets in the entity, the filing of VAT returns in there was challenged by SARS, and as a result, they penalized us in the sense that we were not supposed to file for a certain VAT return because of the assets were currently not under the name of the entity, because the entity was not a legal, or is still not a legal a person that would have to recognize such a VAT return. So we were then penalized on this one. Then on the interest one as well, we had a challenge in 2020, 2021, where we were not able to file on time due to power electricity challenges in the entity or in the factory. Then we've also seen losses on assets and goods that were stock, if I can put it like that. It's assets and stock. We've got challenges in the sense that when we did an asset count in December 2020, we realized in some instances that there were certain assets that were not could not be accounted for. Then we had to classify those as losses. We've got goods that have been dispatched, but we are not able to get a proof of delivery. As a result, we can't really invoice a customer because of the fact that we don't have a proof of delivery. So we've referred these matters for investigation, and the investigation has been initiated for fruitless and wasteful expenditure, as well as the irregular expenditure investigation started in December 2021. So at this stage, we have to wait for the outcome of the investigation to advise on further actions that can be taken on these instances. Under irregular expenditure, most of these irregular expenditure also is emanating from the legacy contract that the entity had before the entity was migrated to the compliance in 2014. I believe that the migration happened in 2014. And prior to that, there were contracts that were entered into without following SCM processes. And as a result, because of those contracts were still active by 2020, then we then had to incur fruitless and irregular expenditure in that instances. The two that relates to the acquisition of trucks, this is because of the fact that when we did the procurement process, we went through with a process of 3 quotation as opposed to the point system that was supposed to be used for those acquisition. So the only transgression here really was the fact that we used a 3 quotation process and not the pointing system process. But in the end, the same supplier would have been awarded the contract for the acquisition of the trucks. The local content is where the transgression here relates to the advertising of the bid, where we were required to indicate in the advertising that the products must be locally produced. Although the advertisement did not indicate that requirement, we were able to get the declaration forms from the suppliers that this would be the locally produced raw material that we will use in our plant. Next slide, please. All right, that's the last presentation. Thank you.
Chairperson, that then takes care of the presentation of the department and the annual performance plan for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so much, COO. At this stage, let me invite the honorable members to make comments, ask questions. I see the hand of Honorable Boshoff. You can go ahead, Honorable Boshoff.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. If we can go to 1.1 under Program 1, the achievement of vacant posts, 28%. You say that the reason therefore is that you had no resources to capture applications. It's very difficult to comprehend that because you knew that you were going to introduce an email applications, and you should have had everything in place, trained the people, got people on board, etc., etc. Why was this not done? 2.1, sexual harassment. It's very disappointing to see that in light of the high rate of GBV in South Africa, that you still do not have this policy in place. Chair, I request through you that we give the department a time period to finalize this matter, because it's not sending a good message to the female employees of the department. 4.1, ethics, also worrisome, because if this is not in place, then the sexual harassment policy, sexual harassment in the department will carry on. We also need to give them a time frame by when it will be completed. The 4.2, the corruption, Honorable Chair, this really needs serious attention. We need to send a message to potential defrauders that no corruption will be tolerated. People must be held to account. Even the state president mentioned this in his SONA debate. 6.1, irregular expenditures increased from about 22%, and 7.1, fruitless and wasteful expenditures also increased by 4% from the previous year. Could they give us an explanation as to why? Because it would appear as if people just don't care, because there seems to be no consequent management with regard to that. With regard to the SEEs, I would like to know, has an agreement been entered into or discussions taken place with regard to government departments to request that they also procure from the SEEs? Coming from Mpumalanga, it's very heart-sore to hear that Mpumalanga's SEE has been put in abeyance. The unemployment rate in Mpumalanga is very, very high amongst the disabled, and it would bode the department well to give attention to this. And then on slide 81, the presenter spoke about the investigations that have been put in place. Could we be given an indication as to how far these investigations are? And then just back to persons with disabilities, I can't remember seeing it. How many people with disabilities are employed in the department? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Bosho. Are there any other members who would like to raise questions or comments? Our member is still here with us.
It's coffee break. Coffee break.
I'm covered by Honorable Bossos.
Oh, thank you. Any other comments on the report? Yeah. Maybe then if they are not, Honorable Mima.
Thank you, Chair. Let me take this opportunity to welcome the report. I just want to sort out something here, the Bluetooth.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks, Chair. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
you
good.
Can go ahead.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Let me welcome the report from the team for accounting to us. Just one area with two parts that I thought maybe it's not coming from the presentation. With the advent of COVID, the special adjustments that were done on the budget, and I believe also on the APP, I see the team is silent on that. I thought that will come. I don't know whether could that be the result as to why there is an element of underperformance, particularly on quarter 1 and 2, though we receive the improvement with regard to quarter 3 and quarter 4. I think in all the 5 areas. So maybe if I can just get an answer from that. But also on page on administration correctly. So you raised it, Chair, the issue of performance versus budget. Performance versus budget. I think it's an area definitely that we need, because if you spend 25%, it means even in the budget you must spend 25%. You can't perform 25%, but then with regard to the expenditure is a completely different picture. It will be important for the team just to give us more details in terms of that, because I see with regard to, I think it's the slide that speaks to the capable and ethical and developmental state. There are reasons that are that are raised there. The reasons advanced is slow capturing because of introduction of email applications. If you could probably just get more elaboration in terms of that. And then when on the issue of the sexual harassment policy, the reason as to why it was not approved, we are informed that it is because of internal delays resulting in inability to finalize approval. Where was the bottlenecks with regard to that? Couldn't the virtual platform enable the team to be able to approve the sexual harassment policy, particularly because of the importance of this policy within the emphasis placed by the cabinet led by the president on the gender-based violence. And then also under 3.3, the acquisition of maintenance and improvement of ICT services. The reason that is given to why SAP did not go live, in addition to COVID-19 lockdown, we are informed that other reasons, there are also various reasons that did not allow the department to succeed with this, particularly with regard to system development and testing. So the system was not ready to go live. I would be happy just to get access to, given the controversy around this subsystem in the Department of Water Affairs, with regard to Department of Employment and Labor. Don't they experience the same challenges with regard to this system? Then the last one, Chair, there's something that I don't understand with regard to the target that was given around research. I'm just trying to isolate where was that, and then we are informed that the research it was achieved, but they only say it was the literature review. My understanding is that a research will be comprising of various chapters. Your chapter 1, your chapter 2 will be literature review, and then chapter 3 will be application of the literature to your problem statement, and then that will be your conclusion. So I don't understand when reasons are when a point is raised to say the research was done, and then the target achieved speaks to the literature review, which clearly indicate that the target was not achieved. If we could just probably get more explanation on that. But other than that, I think I'm happy, Chair, with the report, reasons advanced other than those that I have raised. But key to me is what was the impact of the adjustment that was made on this target? Was I thought there was a revision of these targets. So if that is the case, is the accounting to the committee only based on the revised targets or not? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Mima. No, I don't know if there are any other questions from other members. I think I agree with both of you, Honorable Bishop and Honorable Mima. I think that the other issue in terms of how to categorize this report is that whilst you have not achieved the target, I saw the one of SEE. They have a column which says remedial action. You don't see that in the department. It does not give assurance to the members that the deviation, from the outcome indicator will ever be achieved. For example, the issue that Honorable Bishop was referring to with regard to why there was no achievement with regard to the target on the issue of the employment. The reason is that because of the large volume of application, but there's nothing in terms of the remedial action, meaning that you might find a same response next year when we deal with the annual report, because there's no remedial action with regard to this reason of slow capturing because of introduction of email. That they cannot take the whole year, because we're talking about the annual report here that has 4 quarters. I mean, this should have been really been sorted. When you talk about the very large number of applications, you don't even know how many are those application that did not have resources to capture. The second point, I think the department still owes us a report, a detailed report on this issue of 92% and 25%. I would like to request that the department must really provide us with the details so that we, on our own, we can make sense. For me, it doesn't make sense to hear what the CEO says about the continue to pay the employees and all that stuff. But I don't think the targets around the administration were about compensation of employees only. There are other issues that relate to the targets or output indicators around the issue of administration. I was looking when the CFO was reporting, particularly with regard to the economic classification. I was just checking. I thought that there was going to be underspending. There are some areas, in fact, in all of the areas under the economic classification, there's underspending. I was just wondering if you had achieved the targets, whether you would then have overspending. If you have, underperformed, then there must be a clear breakdown then on this 92. What did this 92% go to if there was a 25% achievement in terms of performance? So we still need that report as a committee that we must be provided with COO. The other issue, though it was not in the APP, but as in previous APP it used to be there, but it just disappeared now. There was an issue of a gender responsive recruitment, which had a target of 45%. If we could get a response on that. I know it was not part of the previous or 2021 APP, but in previous ones, when the strategic plan was introduced to us, this was one of the targets. But also now there's a change even with regard to this vacant funded post. At the time it was saying that we should maintain a 3% or under 3% every quarter. I just want to, with regard to the IES, I'm interested on this issue of the percentage of non-compliant employees received by the statutory services referred for prosecution. I know that it focuses on the 30-day calendar days, and the target day is 50%, but you achieve, I think, half of that. But I'm more interested on the outcomes of these prosecutions, whether there is any progress with these prosecutions. But also I would appreciate if these could be also broken down into the relevant employment law. Those prosecutions that have to do with employment equity, occupational health and safety, basic condition of employment, you know, so that we have an idea with regard to the employment law, which area is really receiving, or is employers are not really taking care of in terms of the relevant employment law. There are other sections, you know, in the past or even in the APP, you would have a report of the department where it will focus on the MTSF outcomes, but then also on the normal programs of the department. I don't see that in the report, and as such, now we are unable to know how the department is performing or is reporting performance with regard to those areas that were indicated in the outcomes or the strategic goals of the department. For example, the issue of the job summit, there were targets in terms of job creation with regard to that. You don't find it under the relevant implementing program, which is labor policy and industrial relations. When you look under the performance of the program, you don't see that, because in the APP, the target was 275,000 jobs that must be created per year. You don't see that, but you don't have, because now these priorities are part of the program. But in the APP, they were separated from the program. They were under what you call priorities, priority number 1, priority 2. The specific one was under economic transformation and job creation, the 275,000 jobs created. So there's no update in terms of what has been achieved, whether we have achieved the 275,000 jobs created per year under that particular program. Also under employment services, I see the numbers that are coming from the provinces, but under this, which was a new indicator at the time, the number of jobs created through the Presidential Comprehensive Youth Employment Intervention, which was 256,050. and implementing a program with public employment, which is a PES. And then there's a number of youth and ET and EET, those that are not in education or training. I think it's 190,000. If we could get an update with regard to that. Yeah, so we don't see that reflected in terms of the implementation and the performance because we're looking at the APP, but then we also look at the report that is flighted in front of us. There's no correlation there. So I'm just raising that point, but there are also other points that are indicated under these priorities, but they're not reflected in terms of their performance in the report itself. Thank you very much, COO, but we didn't expect that we would also get reports from the SEE because we wanted to separate it from the department so that we can invite them on their own to report on their performance. But they've reported now. We will see whether we should invite them on their own to report on their performance and the targets. Because when the APP was presented to us, they did not form part of that report. So that's why you're saying that we were not expecting them to report. We will, as I'm saying, we'll still decide as a committee whether we should still invite them on their own. So that's why maybe there are not much questions that go to the SEE. Thank you very much, COO. If you can respond and perhaps ask the team to.
Well, before Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, the question that I was posing with regard to the research is under 8.1, under program 4, 8.1, where the target is indicated talks to the research to be developed, but now when accounting is to be done, it is no longer the research, because what the target says, it says number of research reports on the impact of labor legislation to the labor market produced. So now what is captured as achieved is not the research report. What is captured as achieved is the draft literature review. It means this target was not met. The second one, Chair, under partnership. Maybe if the team can just advise us. It's under, I think it's page slide 60, slide 59, and slide 60. Partnership agreements concluded. The clarity that I want to ask is, given the work that the department, together with other departments like the Department of Transport, has been engaging with the challenges around foreign truck drivers, the blockage of Moe River Plaza, and given the fact that in 2019, when we were at the SEE of Western Cape in Cape Town, there was a presentation that we got on this, but now the report says nothing, and I thought this will be a continuing program, given the fact that this problem keeps on recurring. So if the team can just advise us as to whether don't they have partnership with the Department of Transport on this matter? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. They are going to report again on the, just immediately after we're done with this one, on the migration policy. They may touch on such as well issues. Honorable Bishop.
Sorry, Chair, thank you very much. I forgot to ask on the SEEs, they spoke about the assets and goods, and there's also an investigation into that issue. I would like to know from the presenter, do they not have a stock register on hand so that they can do it every month to see that the stock remains where it should be? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. COO.
Thanks, Jay. One of the privileges of being part of a team is that you can tell the team members to respond to the areas of their areas of responsibility. So I'm going to do that. I just want to respond in brief on the adjustments in the APP and the budget. It's in the annual report, pages 226 and going forward, if you want to read more detail. But I'm sure the Inspector General will talk about the adjustments in terms of the APP and the targets for inspection services. Also the MTSF outcomes, I take your point, Chair, that you would want to see it in the presentation, but the detailed report is on slides 33 to 38 of the annual report. But I take the point, there are a number of comments and proposals in terms of the presentation, which I take that we will correct that. I'm going to ask the DDG responsible for corporate services to respond to all the matters raised by Honorable Boshoff, as well as the other questions that were raised in terms of the gender responsive recruitment, people with disabilities in the department, anything that touches on her area of responsibility. I would like the CFO to talk about the irregular and fruitless expenditures. Clearly, the CEO for SEE will take his questions, and then the Inspector General, the few that was directed to her. Mr. Mkalipi will take the questions on the research raised by the Honourable Member, and then the few questions for public employment services also will be done by the DDG for that, Mr. Moratoba. So, Chair, if you will allow, I think we can start with the first lot, and that would be corporate services. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Corporate services.
Yes, thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson. I'm going to start with the first question. Should I show the video? Or
please, we want to see you.
Yes, my bandwidth is bad, but I'm just going to show my face and then switch it off because I saw it was in and out. So I'll just show my face for a bit.
Okay.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, you can continue, ma'am.
The first question that was asked was about the vacant posts and why resources were not put in place to capture the applications. This was during the early lockdown periods in 2020, in somewhere around, I think the lockdown started in March. So in the first hard lockdown, there was we stopped doing any
We've lost you now, ma'am.
Chairperson, perhaps while the DDG tries to reconnect, let's take the financial questions then by the CFO.
Okay.
Thank you. The question that was raised around the increase in the fruitless and wasteful expenditure, the major contributor on the fruitless and wasteful expenditure was the damages to the rented car, to the rented vehicles, which I think took some time for it to come through, even though the financial year covers the period when there was lockdown. But these were incidents before that happened before. And the other ones was the no-shows on the accommodation and flight by the officials, of which there is a process both on all of them, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful. The process is now being revamped subject it to the loss control committee. For I think one of the issues that came through from the AG was also the quality of the investigation. We now have established a loss control committee that deals with them, where the investigations are presented and the recommendations taken in there, to make it a point that as a department we've got a unified method of responding to it that is improved from the previous one, where provinces had to do it themselves and there were issues around the quality. But there is consequence management that is being followed, that has been that has been improved for so that it's got less faults in it, both from the internal processes and from the AG. Thank you.
Chair, I'm back. I changed positions. I hope this time around I'll be able to get through.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. Honorable Chair, I was still talking about the vacant positions that I was talking about the fact that this was in 2020 when the first hard lockdown happened. So Q1 was virtually, there was no movement. We did not do any recruitment and selection because we're trying to figure out what would be the best way for us to start with the RNS process. And then in Q2, we then found a way of lessening human interaction, and we opted for email applications. And the email applications, yes, they came in large numbers. And as we're trying to figure out, we also were expected to meet the demands of the departmental recruitment and selection process. So we then found out that we actually needed more computers to assist us in capturing the applications that were coming through, as opposed to how we used to do it manually. Manually, it was simple. You just take a stack and then you go through it, even if it's a large number, because there were many people that could meet in one room and do the sorting and analysis and also the long list. It was easy. But once we did the email system, we had to figure out how to do it. That's the reason why we had delays. And also looking at the capacity that we have within our HRM units throughout the country. The HRM unit is actually ailing in terms of capacity. We're trying to address that by getting contract and probably response handling services from external service providers. And then the sexual harassment policy, it goes through, sorry, yes, Chair?
Can you, I know that we should not wait for 2023 to receive another annual report on the matter. Can you just update us on that aspect?
This aspect, what we then did was we spoke about it, I think, in the previous DEXCOM meetings, where we said we'll have to get services of response handling. We haven't done that, but we improved quite a lot in the subsequent quarters in 2021. But you could not see the effect because to play catch up in this kind of environment on RNS was not easy. Also looking at the target that we had set ourselves in terms of turnaround time. Lost time was lost time and we could not play catch up. And what we did then was the remedial action was for us to look at a different way of setting the target. Instead of talking about response time within 4 months, we then talked about the percentage that you referred to, honorable person, of vacancy rate of 3%. That was in the financial year 2021, 2022. So we've seen quite a bit. Even there, it was also a rough ride because 3% was not an easy target to achieve. If you look at our history of vacancy rate, we've always achieved around 9%, which is a standard set by the DPSA. The DPSA standard is vacancy rate, which is a norm, 9.9% vacancy rate. So we try to be smarter and, aim for excellence. And we set our target in 2021-22 to 3%, which we didn't do very well. And then in 2020, as we revised our targets for 2022-23, which is the ensuing year, the year that's gonna come now, we've taken it back to 8% vacancy rate. That is just 1% or 2% above the norm that is set by the DPSA. And we are also going to employ the response handling services to assist us with the capturing of the applications, because we also still having capacity problems within HRM unit. Can I go on, Honorable Chair?
Yes, no, go on. If you can,
Okay.
in the process where there's no achievement, if you can just
Yes.
indicate the remedial action as well.
All right, not a problem.
Don't have,
And
so
then
that I
on-
don't have
on-
to interrupt you from time
Yes,
to time.
thank you, Chair. Sexual harassment policy, it was also the issue of the hard lockdown and the availability of our main stakeholders, mainly the departmental bargaining chamber, which had to sit and get the introductory policies. Amongst those was the sexual harassment policy. But at the moment, what we did was the policy has been introduced to the DBC workshop, and the DBC, the Departmental Bargaining Chamber, has discussed the policy, the draft policy, and they provided inputs to the policy because they are our main stakeholders. And we took it back as a second draft. Now we're working on a final draft, which will be taken to DBC, to the formal DBC for final adoption. It has been taken through the other, it will have to be taken through the other structures within the department, and then will be taken to DBC for final adoption and endorsement, and then we will start implementing the policy. Our aim was that we wanted to have the policy in place by Q2 of the financial year 2022-23, so that we build in the consultation process in our timelines. So hopefully by Q2 of the next financial year, it will be in place. And the ethics management also suffered the same thing of the hard lockdown. The ethics management so far, the ethics strategy has been drawn up. We are talking about implementation of the strategy. In 2021-22, we were implementing different phases of the ethics strategy, and that has been adopted and it has been approved. So we are now just implementing the different phases of the ethics strategy. We have an ethics unit that has been formed within the office of the DG, and the ethics unit is taking care of all ethics issues within the department. And one thing that we've done very well is setting up an ethics committee chaired by the DDG Corporate Services. And the only problem that we had in the year 2020, I think it's late 2021, we didn't have the last quarter meeting of the ethics committee. But then our catch-up plan is that in the new financial year, we're going to have the next meetings for the ethics committee after we've done the financial disclosures. And the other development is that we've been requested to also start looking at the audit, lifestyle audits. That is being done, the plan has been drawn up, and that is going to be a collaborative effort between ethics unit as well as the risk management unit in the department. On corruption cases, most of the cases that are, as the COO had said earlier, that get delayed are because of the fact that we refer them to external law enforcement agencies if they are very complex. And some cannot be resolved within the 90 days that has been set as a standard. So we then refer them to the law enforcement agencies like your SIU, your South African Police Services, and the others. And when they are referred, we just deem them to be not concluded because we those cases belong to the department. And therefore, if they're not concluded, they're still referred to another agency outside. We cannot close the cases and say the cases have been concluded. So those are mainly the ones that are getting delayed in terms of being finalized within the 90-day period. The other question that was asked was about the number of people with disabilities that are employed in the department. The target that has been set by the DPSA is 2.2%. The department has exceeded that target. We are currently sitting at 2.5% in terms of people with disabilities that are in the employ of the department, which translates to a number 225 employees with disabilities. And Chair, you are right when you mentioned the gender responsive recruitment. We introduced that target in 2021-22, and we still carried it through into 22-23 in place of the sexual harassment policy. What we did with the sexual harassment policy, we haven't left it lying, we'll continue on a work plan level, but then we elevated the gender issue on the gender responsive recruitment, and we elevated it to the APP status. So it still remains even in the new financial year 22-23, and you'll see us reporting on it in 2021-22. And we're doing very well on that because we had said over the MTF period, by year 3 from now, because we started counting last year in 2021-22, by year 3 from now, which would be year 5 from the time when we put in that target, we should have reached 50% parity in terms of female employees occupying the SMS positions in the department. At the moment, we've got a target of 45%, and we are already on 47 point something, roughly translated 48% in terms of women that are occupying SMS positions in the department. So we have no doubt that by year 3 from now, we should have met the 50% target that we set ourselves. I think I've explained the quarter 1, quarter 2 underperformance, and I think that was a general comment. But the main important question that I think also Honorable Chairperson, you hammered on was the 92% expenditure versus 25% achievement of targets. What happens here is that when you look at the targets that are on the APP, those are selective targets that we take from our global targets. We've got a lot of targets that lie at the work plan level, which is not indicated on the APP. Now, on the APP, we single out only strategic targets, which will then be reported on. But when you look at the global budget of the program admin would be a budget that would cover everything and anything, and even things that don't appear on the APP. Now, when you measure the expenditure, the global expenditure, the total expenditure of the program versus the achievement of the targets that are strategic and have been elevated on the APP, there will never be an equal measure. There won't be equal ever, unless we take everything, including salaries and transfers and all those kind of things, and we put them on the APP. Then you will have an equal measure and an equal comparison. But right now, we're comparing things that not necessarily comparable, because under program 1, we have those number of targets that we have, but it's not the entire number of targets that we have that drive our performance within administration. If you want to see the detail of that, we'll have to go to the work plans of each and every component within the department that fall under admin program. So I hope that that is clear. And then there was also, oh yeah, the other question that was asked, Honorable Chair, was on the SEP system that didn't go live. We had a delay that was was caused by the service provider because of the they also had a reason aligned to the lockdown in 2020. Therefore, that somehow delayed most of the processes that we had to undertake within the SEP project. But we then met with the service provider, and then we agreed on a revised project plan, which will take into account the new days and the new realistic targets that we're supposed to meet under the SEP project. For example, the new revised ones were mainly under the two core activities, IES and Public Employment Services, whose go-live date on the system has been revised, and it's going to happen, if it's not happened now in March, it will happen somewhere in May or June, and then the others will follow. So we've got a new revised project plan on the SEP roadmap map project. And this is monitored tightly by a SEP steerco, which is chaired by the accounting officer. And it meets on a monthly basis. Chair, I think I've covered most of the questions or all of the questions that were asked under administration. If I haven't, please, I would be willing to answer any other that I might have left, but I took them all down. Thank you so much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. So I want to suggest now that at this stage that we stop, and we request that we be provided with responses on the outstanding questions in writing, and that we should now take the next presentation, I think on the migration policy. I'm worried because we're supposed to be done as a committee by 1800 hours. It's almost 5:20 now. If members agree that we receive the written responses in 7 days, and then we continue with the next presentation.
Thank you, Chair.
Do you agree, honorable members?
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Agree, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, honorable members. So I hand over to you, but don't know if you. Yeah, the next presentation on migration policy.
Thank you, Chair. The migration policy, the Deputy Director General, Mr. Moratoba for Public Employment Services, will take us through the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bazia, can you flight the presentation, or Committee Secretary?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, members, and my colleagues. Honorable Chairperson and members, this is work in progress. The draft policy is out there for public comment, with the intention that we will finalize it and take it to NEDLEC, and thereafter submit it with the report from NEDLEC back to Cabinet, and then subsequently to Parliament somewhere around September, if the contents are sufficiently received. In the presentation, I'll just cover 5 aspects. If you can go to the next slide. what the policy basically intends, Honorable Chairperson, is to try and do a very difficult thing. Firstly, to strike a balance between the expectations of the population regarding worsening unemployment and perception that foreign nationals are taking their jobs. Secondly, we want to make sure that we are able to provide the labor market with the skills that it needs, especially where we don't have. Thirdly, we want to make sure that we protect the rights of migrants and their families in accordance with international standards and guidelines and protocols. And fourthly, we want to secure and ensure that in doing all those things, we don't alienate South Africa from regional integration and cooperation, because most of the goods and services that we produce are normally sold out there. And this whole process is being done in line with the modern day approach on harnessing the developmental potential of migrants. If we can move on to the next slide. Now, you will recall that this process was agreed to way back in 2017 when the Ministers of Labor and Employment agreed to develop a protocol on migration to ensure harmonization. And also there's been a problem around the absence of a policy where Home Affairs and Labor, Employment and Labor were requested to provide guidance on this matter. And we did not have legislative framework. You will recall or remember, honorable members, that we have had so many meetings with truck drivers, industries. This morning, we're talking to people in Cape Town, where we had another incident between Zimbabweans and Lesotho and locals in the Robertson area around these fights for scarce resources. You remember that this issue has been rife in the Oudtshoorn area and most parts of Cape Town, including parts of Gauteng and KZN. And obviously, there are bilateral agreements that have been signed that remain out there. Some of them go back to the 60s. The circumstances and conditions under which they were concluded differs completely from today, and some of them may not stand the test of alignment with our constitution, because they used neighboring countries as a source of cheap labor, especially for recruitment in the mining industry and the spread in the agricultural and so on. If you can move on to the next slide. I covered the question of the previous policies and the fact that there are different statistics around the percentages of migrants. We're hoping that the new figures of census will give us an indication. But since 2000, we have seen a large influx, and that is because of the porous borders and the pull factors and socio and economic conditions that prevail in neighboring countries, including some parts of Africa. And most of these undocumented workers are found in informal sectors where they are not registered, and sometimes work for labor brokers. And you will never find them in the books of some of their employers, because they know that they're employing them in breach of the current Immigration Act. And the white paper on migration written by Home Affairs tried to a certain extent to deal with this issue extensively. Next slide. The principles that we adopted in developing the policy, obviously we had a number of groups that worked with the ILO and our counterparts in other areas, the Employment Services Board, the DG clusters, the ministerial cluster, and so on. But we took cue from the Global Compact, the African Union, and the South African Development protocols that have been signed, the National Development Plan, the Constitution of our country, especially Section 36, but also the Constitution affirms the rights of migrants, and various legislation and labor legislation in particular does not discriminate against foreign nationals. And the act that talks to how we should manage the employment of foreign nationals, Section 8 and 9 of the Employment Services Act, is there but was seen to be insufficient or having a number of gaps, hence the proposal to amend that section with the introduction of a new chapter that will deal with a whole range of aspects that have been identified. You can move on to the next slide. The vision is to ensure that we have got an effective government leadership which is supported by social partners, and we make sure that there is orderly process for allowing for safe, orderly, and regular migration for employment of high, semi-skilled and low-skilled workers from South Africa and to other countries in pursuit of our national priorities. Next slide. There are a number of areas that we are proposing. The first one relates to the governance of migration, because there you need to adjust structures within the department, look at the coordination by the interministerial committee, and ensure that we have got the social dialogue and support of social partners. Next slide. The second area is around the data monitoring and evaluation, because without very clear statistics, we are unable at this stage, although collectively with Stats SA, Home Affairs, we can talk to you about the numbers of documented people that arrive and depart and those that are granted asylum stickers. That information we have, but when it comes to undocumented, it is very difficult for us to maintain that data and to make sure that we're able to analyze and disseminate and have information that is very clear for planning. And that is why we're also working with the Department of Small Business to ensure that in the area of small business, we also have data in terms of the number of foreign nationals who are licensed and are running various small businesses, because they have the potential of employing a lot of people. So data collection for monitoring and evaluation so that we can measure our impact was one of the key second area that we focused on. The third one, if you can move on to the next slide, relates to migration to South Africa. Now, this has to do with how we regulate and make sure that people from outside can access the labor market. We can attract skills that we need. We can prevent fraudulent and unethical recruitment, because currently people are recruited and we get to know that they work for some areas when they are injured. The question of rights is critical, because people often employ migrants that are not documented for the, with the intention of exploiting them. And the social protection of migrants. I mean, some people may be here for legitimate business. Some may be staff working in the diplomatic corps, etc. So every country, and honorable members, you have visited other countries and you have enjoyed the protection that is afforded to anyone. And I think South Africa needs to also protect migrants arriving in South Africa, coming for different reasons. Even migrants who are undocumented, there are laws and processes that are followed when it comes to their detention, their holding cells, and their deportation. But also, we need to support the regional labor market initiatives. The fourth area has to do with the labor migration from South Africa. Next slide, please. Now, honorable members, it's one thing to talk about South Africans, but we know that there are a lot of South Africans in Saudi Arabia, in New Zealand, and other areas. But we have not had a proper process that looks at the data mapping on how South Africans are moving in which countries, because the country invests a lot of money in the institutions of learning, looking at the diaspora outreach and sensitizing them on their rights out there. Often our missions normally get to know, like recently in Ukraine and other areas, when South Africans who are working in those countries are in danger, and they would normally not know how they came in, the kind of working conditions that they're exposed to, and making sure that we provide incentives for workers, for South Africans who work abroad, to come back home in case we need them, and we enter into agreements with overseas recruitment to facilitate the placement of South Africans to work abroad so that they can gain the necessary skills and knowledge and be able to come back and plow it, but also to assist those countries that may not have the additional skills or excess skills that we have locally, and in the process lower our unemployment rate. If you look at Chinese government of India, you go to every country, they promote the employment of their nationalities across, so that we also do the same and benefit from that process instead of looking inward only. So those are the four pillars that we are looking at in terms of this policy. Next slide. I think we can move on and skip the slides. But honorable members, safe to say that the policy is currently, has gone through a number of processes. It has been to cabinet, it has been to policy forums, it has been to quite a number of government internal process. We have liaised with the stakeholders at NEDLEC, the Employment Services Board, and currently we are inviting comments. We've received in excess of more than 120 written submissions in the first week of the policy's release. We are analyzing those, trying to understand the kind of sentiments that people are raising, and we are working with a technical team that is making sure that we are able to isolate silent point. And on the bill side, the bill basically translates the policy into a legislation for the intention of implementing it. And we have until end of May for public consultations, and we will have a month or two at NEDLEC. And given the substantive issues that may be raised, we may go to cabinet in July, and we should table something to yourselves, the Labour Portfolio Committee and the Select Committee in Parliament during August, September, so that you are able to process the proposed amendments before the end of the year. And I think we have argued around the downside if we don't have this policy, because we may end up with inconsistent approaches to our act and so on. And whilst we believe that this is a public comment stage and we have not arrived at yourself as members of parliament, you are also welcome to submit any comments. But at this stage, we have not as yet finalized the policy. It is a draft that is still out there for public consultation, and I'm sure you would have seen the kind of reaction and the kind of mood and debate it has structured. But one thing that we can say is that it has actually raised the consciousness of employers in South Africa to seriously look at their practices when it comes to recruitment, especially between locals and foreign nationals. Let me submit and stop there, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mroto, for the presentation. Honorable members, any comments, questions? Perhaps remember earlier, Honorable Moimang asked a question about the relationship or the role of a Department of Transport. Maybe we'll elaborate later. Let's start with the Honorable Bosho, followed by Honorable Moimang, and then Honorable Dango. In that order, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know that this is a draft policy, but I would just like to know, if reading through it and listening to the presenter, my mind started wondering whether this NMP does not suggest that foreign nationals are the reason for the high unemployment rate. I think we are blaming the wrong people. We should have a look at our education system. We should look at a dysfunctional home affairs system, department, because the majority of our learners currently are illiterate. And before we address this, we are not going to get the unemployment stats down. And what else we are doing is we are now going to give the minister the right to decide how many documented foreign nationals may be employed. According to my mind, this is definitely going to spark xenophobia. What will this do to our free market trade, especially with our African countries? And then with regard to the Employment Services Act, we cannot condone a statutory statutory employment quotas, as this is definitely unconstitutional. How are we going to keep on attracting foreigners, foreign nationals with critical skills if we enact this policy? Because we know that skills lead to economic growth. And I see the presenter also spoke about stakeholders that they're going to involve, like Stats South Africa. They weren't even able to do the stats that they were supposed to do before the due date on 28 February. So I don't know how they're going to assist your department in giving you the correct stats. Then I'd like to know what safety measures will they be looking at and putting in place to ensure that foreign nationals that are eventually given a job because of their critical skills are kept in a safe and good environment? What are we going to do with foreign nationals that currently have businesses and are employing South Africans? And let me just see. No, I think that's all. Okay, yes. What I want to know is at the end, the presenter spoke about looking at South Africans that are in foreign countries, but I would like to know, we all know that we have many South Africans in foreign countries, but if we should enact this policy, what will the implications, what could the implications be on employees in foreign countries? I'm sure there is going to be a backlash. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bishop. Honorable Mima.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Let me also welcome the presentation on the migration policy. Like as you have correctly pointed out, Chair, one of the issues that I raised earlier on the partnership that the department reflected on when they made a presentation. One of the area that I asked was given the concern that has been raised around foreign truck drivers and how that manifested itself in violence around Moya River Plaza, but more than that, given the fact that this, I mean, at the center of the dispute was the employment of the foreign truck drivers. I deliberately asked that question because there's the expectation, and also from the experience that we had with the presentation that we had in 2019 from the Department of Employment and Labor, it clearly indicated that there is that working relationship. But now, from the presentation of the policy, clearly what is emerging is that there are international agreements that has to be taken into account that will not necessarily negate our posture with regard to how we relate to SADC, and not only just SADC with the African Continental Free Trade. Clearly, the red tapes that will sort of dilute the letter and spirit of the AFT has to be addressed. So now, key to my question is whether the Department of Transport, did they interact with you when they drafted the regulation that somehow placed a limitation on the PDP of foreign truck drivers, because the limitation that regulation from the Department of Transport placed suggests that the PDP of foreign truck drivers, or the public driver's permit of the foreign truck drivers, will only apply in the country of their origin. It means when you are a foreign truck driver with the PDP registered in Zimbabwe, the only vehicle that you can drive is the one of the car that is registered in Zimbabwe, meaning that on the face of it, you can't, as a foreign truck driver, use your PDP for a vehicle that is registered in South Africa. Maybe just to elaborate further, the draft regulation of 116A recognizes only driving permits used in a foreign country when the vehicle driven is registered in the same country whereby holder of a permit was also registered. In other words, the draft regulation removes the recognition of a professional driving permit used in a foreign country if the vehicle being used is registered in South Africa. To me, it's important that the executive must be able to find convergence, particularly with the migration policy as proposed, but more than that, also this draft regulation, which to me seems to be bypassing the migration policy. So hence my question was, to what extent, from the partnership, given the presentation that was made, quite well for sure that there is an interministerial task team, one assumes that this regulation must have been canvassed with the Department of Employment and Labor, because it deals specifically, it restricts and limits the employment of foreign truck drivers in our country if their PDP is registered in a foreign country. They can't drive a vehicle that is registered in our country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Honorable Tango.
Yes, Chairperson. I recognize that the legislation is draft, but I think that the department should look at countries that actually actively export labor, such as the Philippines, Pakistan, India, and how they deal, particularly the Philippines, how they deal with that matter. Now, contrary to expectations, South African medical staff are highly sought after, both in the Middle East and in the UK and countries like that. Some of these countries have got a policy that the person that actually wants to take up this particular position takes it up for 5 years. They still carry on paying their pensions. They maintain their position back home so that they're actually encouraged to come back home after earning some foreign currency. I think in Saudi Arabia at the time, nurses were earning $7,000 a month. That's one level, and I think that is what they should look at as the countries that actually actively export labor. They've got policies around this matter. The other export of labor that is a danger is the SSA people, or the former security people that now protect the Americans in Iraq, or protected them there, protect them in the UK, protected them elsewhere. They never ask you before they go out. The only time you know about them is when they come back in body bags. Then they become South Africans, and DIRCO must deal with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tang. Mr. Mroto, I think the Honorable Moimanga has touched on the issue of Regulation 116A. The main issue that I think he was asking, to what extent are departments developing their own regulations that may contradict the labor migration policy? If you have also taken that into account, it could be Department of Home Affairs developing its own regulations, and Department of Transport. What we want to know, if you are aware of what other departments are doing to address issues of the foreign nationals that are employed in South Africa, and also those that come to South Africa, maybe like truck drivers, the issue of the professional driving permits. The specific one that he was referring to, which says the authority provided by a professional driving permit issued in a foreign country shall apply in respect of a vehicle registered in the country that issued such permit. And it says, to a permit referred to in sub-regulation 1 shall not apply to a vehicle registered in the Republic. So what we want to know, because you say all these first go to cabinet, but you find that there's some contradiction when you look on each one of them, in terms of overall framework in which these policies emanating from. But also whether these, for example, the legal advice that we receive from Parliament, which we'll be considering tomorrow in a committee meeting that is chaired by Honorable Moimang. Looks at also the whether constitutionally the policy, the regulation, I would say by extension, the labor migration policy, does it take into account Section 9 of the Constitution and Section 23, which protect workers irrespective of which country they come from? Whether when you develop this policy, you take into account what the Constitution, particularly Section 9 and the Section 23, but also the international agreements that have been ratified by the country through Parliament, and the conventions, be it the Vienna Convention and other conventions that have been ratified, whether these policies are taking into account those international agreements that have been ratified, including the point that Honorable Dango is raising, that we are also exporting employees. Has made mention of the nurses. I remember there was, I think in the 90s, there were a lot of nurses who were going out of the countries in areas such as Saudi Arabia. I think he was an ambassador there at the time, if I'm correct. Yeah, over to you, Mr. Mroto.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Let me start with the last point, because it will then clarify a number of issues raised. Honorable members and Honorable Chairperson, the President, given the sensitivity around migration, appointed an interministerial committee on migration specifically that has got 12 departments. Those departments, the interministerial committee is co-chaired by the Minister of Employment and Labor and the Minister of Home Affairs, and it is expected to report like quarterly to Cabinet on a range of issues. And just to give you a taste, Home Affairs is dealing with the review of the Immigration Act, the Citizenship Act, the Refugees Act into one legislation. The Department of Agriculture is dealing with a number of issues ranging from food and mouth, and a number of issues that we can talk about, seasonal workers and all that, that we are presented within the committee. The Land Reform and Rural Development, you know, the question of spatial, the question of housing and all ownership of land, etc. International relations is part of the IMC, because we have to look at the treaties that we are talking about. The Department of Justice and Correctional Services is part of the committee, because we look at the act dealing with the protection against racism, xenophobia, and so on. The Mineral Resources and Energy is a huge employer of migrants traditionally, and they're part of the committee because this policy is likely to affect them, but the emoluments that go to different countries, including a whole range of issues around the diseases that people would normally suffer post their employment in the mines and so on. Small business, I talked about this, on its potential to employ, the licensing, you know, all these things that the Dudula movements and others are raising. They are part of that. State security, there's a lot of issues around crime, human trafficking, syndicates that are operating given our porous borders and so on. Tourism, if you look at the statistics, honorable members, of the people that come as visitors to bring obviously the huge investment, but that are not returning, it's a huge concern to Home Affairs. You know, from every 15 million that visits the country, on average, about 1.3 million don't go back. which is a huge issue. Trade and industry, obviously, and competition. We deal with free trade of free movement of goods, trade, and all the transport. We are very aware of the regulations, and remember, the 4 ministers have been at the forefront of dealing with this issue with the ATDF, the National Truck Drivers Association, the truck owners, all the road blockades. We have been there with the Department of Transport, and we understand exactly the issues. But we have also looked at other legislation in the neighboring countries that are creating a problem. And Honorable Women, we understand clearly the context of that policy is not in contradiction. What it does is that if a foreign registered truck is traveling to transport goods and services to South Africa and driven by a foreign national, there's no problem because it may be a left-hand truck and so on. The PDP will apply in South Africa as long as they drive the truck that is registered in their own country. And equally, the PDP registered in South Africa will apply when a South African driver drives a truck in Zimbabwe or elsewhere. But what will not apply is for a foreign national to use their PDP to gain employment locally in order to displace, because the requirements are different. Just to give you an example, a South African is expected out of a period ranging, if it's truck or public transport, 6 months or so to renew their permits. In other countries, when you get your license, you get your PDP for life. Others is 10 years. So whether you have developed epilepsy or your life has deteriorated, you don't get to renew that, where else locally it's been done. And hence you have a large number of truck accidents in that. So in short, we are aware of the developments across other countries, other departments, to ensure that there's no contradiction. And our DG and the DG Home Affairs chairs the technical committee of DGs. I'm the secretariat of that committee, given our centrality in the whole process, together with my colleague, Mr. McKay from Home Affairs, to support the DGs before we go to ministers. In terms of the Constitution, honorable members will know that we can't go through the socio-economic impact or go to Cabinet, and Cabinet would approve anything that is inconsistent with the Constitution of the country or agreements that have been reached. Yes, all laws apply to South Africa. We know Section 9, we know Section 23 of the Constitution, but go and also check Section 36, because Section 36 also allows, yes, limitations. There are limitations, and obviously, if you can justify why you are doing this action or introducing this law, we got legal advice and a pre-certification from the state law advisors that the draft bill is in line with the Constitution. Otherwise, they would have never allowed us to print. Now, I said, Honorable Chairperson, just to respond to Honorable Boshoff, we're proposing 4 things. These other things that are being raised are not in the bill. It's people's perception, it's what people think. It's what they believe to be, they're speculating what is likely to happen. That's not what we are saying in the proposed bill. We are raising 4 things, and we would welcome the comments on the 4 things. As to what happens to business, whether it will spark xenophobia and all that, I think we talk about irregular migration. We talk about the rights of migrants. I don't think there is anywhere in the policy where it promotes xenophobia we have been on radio, we have been speaking to all these movements about the rights of migrants and how they need to refrain from those actions contrary to what is being said. And in most cases, even the migrants themselves have made representation, and we are constantly talking to members of the embassies and our labor colleagues in their countries. We by the way have lost from those countries. Some of them, I think, honorable members, you just need to look at them yourselves and look at what they say. I think our approach is completely different, because where some of them have completely banned or introduced laws that prohibits employment of people in lower levels, we are saying, given our standing within the region and the relationship that we've enjoyed over the years with these countries, let us look at quotas. And you just have to look at football, honorable members. This is not a new concept. Even the biggest sports in the world, FIFA, does limit the number of foreign players that can be fielded in the professional teams during the time of play. And that is there to protect employment and to make sure that what we have seen, especially in Europe and other areas, those xenophobic tendencies against foreign players is limited because of the spread of employment to also ensure that locals are employed. But FIFA also prohibits the fielding of foreign nationals to represent a specific country unless that player would have denounced their citizenship. So even if we can have a best goalkeeper in Sundowns, unfortunately we can't field that goalkeeper when Bafana plays against a specific country. In fact, that very same best goalkeeper will be playing wearing the jersey of their home country against Bafana. And I think this is something that we have all come to accept. And let me stop there, Honorable Chair, because the others want people such as yourself to respond to. I will only confine myself to the 4 things that we're proposing in the policy. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murto, for your response. Honorable members, as Mr. Murto was indicating that this is work in progress. From time to time, we'll be inviting the department to update us on the matter. But as indicated that the department is in the process, part of the process of this is to introduce a bill on this matter, a bill that will at some stage come to our committee as well. It's already after 6 now, 3 minutes after 6. So we had indicated earlier that we should be done by 1800 hours. I know some members also have a meeting that started 1800 hours. We really thank the department for coming, and as I was indicating that this whole since last month, the 22nd of February, we've been dealing with the department in various areas, the legislation. Now we just dealt with the annual performance report and the update on the labor migration policy. We, as indicated, we will await the written responses from the department on the areas that have not been responded to. Can I give the COO the parting shot?
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the opportunity. I think we have had a lot that we had to say and share with the committee. So I've taken note of all the comments made. We will make sure that we will provide those written questions, the answers to the questions that we did not have time for. I've taken note of the comments that you made in terms of the presentation, and we will improve on that. Chairperson, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it was an exhaustive discussion. So thank you very much for that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll see each other again when you come back to present the annual performance plan for 2022-2023. Yeah. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to honorable members for attending and also your participation. The officials from the Department of Labor and its entities, the parliamentary staff, staff of the committee. Yeah, thank you very much for your attendance. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.